24 granite boxes are sitting right now in the dark underneath the Egyptian desert. Each one weighs between 70 and 100 tons. Each one was carved from a single piece of the hardest stone ancient Egypt could access, quarried 800 kilometers away, transported across the desert, and somehow placed inside an underground tunnel system where the ceiling barely clears the top of the box. When engineers finally got inside with precision instruments and measured the interior surfaces, they found something that made them stop and measure again. The interior walls of these boxes are flat to within 2/10,000ths of an inch across surfaces several feet wide. The lid fits the box so precisely that you cannot slide a sheet of paper between them. And when Grok AI was given every published measurement, every engineering analysis, every piece of experimental archaeology data available, and asked to evaluate what manufacturing process could produce these results using ancient Egyptian tools, the answer it came back with was not the answer anyone was hoping for, because the answer was simple. It cannot be done. Not with copper tools, not with abrasive sand, not with any technique in the documented ancient Egyptian toolkit. So the question sitting in the dark underneath Saqqara right now, the question that has been sitting there for 4,500 years is this: who made these things and how? The place is called the Serapeum. It sits at Saqqara, the massive ancient burial plateau south of Giza in Egypt, a short walk from the famous Step Pyramid of Giza, which is one of the oldest pyramid structures on Earth. Tourists visit Saqqara constantly. Very few of them know that underneath the sand where they are walking, carved into the bedrock of the plateau, there is a tunnel system. And inside that tunnel system, in rock-cut side chambers spaced at regular intervals along the main galleries, sit the boxes. The man who found them was a French archaeologist named Auguste Mariette. He arrived at Saqqara in 1850, looking for something else entirely. He was searching for statues mentioned in ancient texts, and his team had uncovered a sphinx buried to its neck in sand. Following the line of sphinx statues led him to a buried doorway. The doorway led into a tunnel cut from the limestone bedrock of the plateau, and what Mariette found inside that tunnel reportedly stopped him cold in a way that nothing in his previous career had managed to do. A man who had spent his life looking at the monuments of ancient Egypt was now standing underground, looking at objects that made those monuments look rough. He reportedly could not find words for the first view. The boxes simply do not prepare you, by any account of anyone who has been inside. What Mariette was looking at was this. The tunnels are roughly 5 meters high and 3 meters wide, cut into solid limestone. At regular intervals along the walls of the tunnels, the builders had cut side chambers, each one large enough to house an object of considerable size, and in each chamber, set into the floor, sat a granite box. A rectangular container carved from a single piece of Aswan, rose granite, the hardest and densest stone that ancient Egyptian quarrymen had access to. The quarry it came from is at Aswan, 800 kilometers to the south of Saqqara, up the Nile. Most of the boxes measure approximately 4 meters long, 2.5 meters wide, and 3.5 meters tall. The lids, also solid granite, weigh between 20 and 30 tons each. The boxes themselves, the main body of the container, weigh between 70 and 100 tons. Mariette counted 24 of them. He found some that had been broken open, whether by ancient grave robbers or by explorers who came before him is not clear. Some of those contained traces of bones, later identified as bull bones. Some contained nothing at all. No inscriptions of any significance were found on the boxes themselves, which for ancient Egyptian funerary objects is remarkable, because ancient Egyptian burial equipment is almost never without inscription. No jewelry, no shaptis, the small servant figures that accompanied important burials. No canopic jars for the preserved organs, no amulets. The boxes were almost entirely empty. And that emptiness, combined with the extraordinary precision of their surfaces, is what has made these objects the single most contested items in the entire archaeology of ancient Egypt. The official explanation was established shortly after Mariette's discovery, and it has served Egyptology for over 150 years. The Apis bull was one of the most sacred animals in ancient Egyptian religion. It was considered the earthly manifestation of Ptah, one of the most important gods in the Memphis theological tradition, the tradition centered on the region where Saqqara sits. When an Apis bull died, it was mummified with elaborate ceremony and buried with great ritual significance. Documentary evidence for this practice goes back approximately 14 centuries. Hieroglyphic texts reference Apis bull burials at Saqqara. Historical records from multiple periods confirm the cult's existence and its importance. The Serapeum, on this explanation, is the Apis bull burial ground. The boxes are sarcophagi. The bull bones confirm animal burials. Case closed, case filed, case trusted for a century and a half. And here is the circular problem that Grok's analysis identified clearly when processing all of this data. To abrasively grind a surface to a flatness tolerance of 2/10,000ths of an inch, you need a reference surface that is more precise than your target. You cannot check flatness without something flatter to compare against. In modern precision manufacturing, this problem is solved by using diamond abrasives, precision grinding wheels, computer-controlled machine movements, and laser interferometry that can measure surface deviation to nanometer precision in real time. Ancient Egyptian craftsmen had none of these things. They had copper tools. They had dolerite pounding stones, which are harder than granite and were used to fracture the surface grain by grain. They had quartz sand as an abrasive. They had wooden straight edges and their own trained eyes. Experimental archaeology has established clearly what these tools can achieve. Researchers who have attempted to replicate ancient Egyptian stoneworking techniques on granite have produced impressive, genuinely skilled results. Smooth surfaces, visually beautiful work, the products of obvious expertise developed over generations. Those surfaces, when measured with precision instruments, are flat to within several hundredths of an inch at best. Several hundredths, compared to 2 10,000ths. That is not a refinement of the same technique. That is a difference of more than an order of magnitude. And applying the same technique more carefully for longer does not bridge an order of magnitude gap. The gap is a capability gap, not a skill gap. The surface texture of the Serapeum box interiors made the engineering analysis even sharper. Ancient Egyptian granite work done with abrasive techniques leaves characteristic marks. The surfaces produced by pounding and grinding with stone tools have a specific texture, slightly irregular, with the directional marks of the abrasive working visible under magnification. Anyone who has examined confirmed ancient Egyptian granite work with good lighting and a magnifying glass can identify this texture immediately because it is consistent across everything from granite obelisks to pyramid chambers to statuary. The interior surfaces of the Serapeum boxes do not match this texture. Independent microscopic analysis of those surfaces found striations consistent with directional uniform abrasion, which matches precision machining characteristics, not hand finishing characteristics. The texture is wrong for ancient Egyptian abrasive stonework. And the absence of the expected texture is not a small discrepancy. It is the kind of discrepancy that, in any engineering context, would cause you to question your assumption about how the object was made. Then there is the lid-to-box fit. For a lid weighing between 20 and 30 tons to seat on the top of a box, such that a sheet of paper cannot be inserted between the contact surfaces, those surfaces must be manufactured to what precision engineers call lapping tolerance. Lapping is a specific process in industrial manufacturing, where two surfaces are ground against each other with fine abrasive compound until they achieve near-perfect contact at essentially a molecular level. This process requires controlled conditions, precision abrasives, careful management of material removal, and measurement equipment to verify progress at every stage. The Serapeum lids sit on the boxes with the kind of fit that industrial lapping produces. Dunn described the contact surfaces as comparable to industrial lapping, and this description has been reproduced by other independent technical assessors who examined the boxes. That level of fit on a surface spanning several meters, achieved on two surfaces that each weigh tens of tons, using only ancient Egyptian tools, has no demonstrated precedent anywhere in the experimental archaeology record. Now add the weight problem. Each box was carved from a single piece of granite, not assembled from multiple blocks, which would be a technically reasonable solution to the problem of moving enormous stone masses, but cut from one piece. Starting with a single granite block of over 100 tons, removing the interior to create the box shape, which involves cutting and extracting roughly half the original material mass, and then moving the finished object 800 kilometers from the quarry at Aswan to Saqqara by Nile barge, and then somehow maneuvering it into an underground tunnel system and placing it precisely in a side chamber with only a few feet of ceiling clearance above the top of the box. Mariette found evidence of winches and rollers and sand-lowering infrastructure, which tells you the Egyptians were solving the transport problem with genuine engineering. But the tunnel geometry creates a placement problem that none of the proposed ancient methods fully solve. To position a 100-ton granite box in a side chamber using ramps and levers, you need working space. Space for the ramp, space for the levers, space for the workers applying force. The Serapeum tunnels do not provide that space. The boxes are positioned in their chambers as though they were slid into place along the tunnel axis in a smooth, controlled horizontal movement. Grok's analysis of the tunnel floor in sections where it has been examined noted that it appears smooth and level in a manner consistent with a surface prepared for sliding heavy objects, rather than a raw carved tunnel floor. This is suggestive, not conclusive, but combined with the geometry of the placement problem, it raises a question about whether the tunnels were built around boxes that were already in position, rather than boxes being installed after the tunnels were complete. If the boxes came first, the engineering sequence looks entirely different from the standard assumption. The acoustic properties of the boxes were not part of the Grok analysis framework anyone predicted would matter, but it turned out to be one of the most striking findings. In 2023, researchers presented findings at the 5th International Conference on Archaeoacoustics in Malta on resonant phenomena in subterranean Egyptian monuments, including the Serapeum. In 2024, a study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science reports documented acoustic measurements inside the Serapeum galleries and individual boxes. What these measurements found was not random. The granite boxes produce sustained fundamental frequencies in the range of 60 to 120 Hz when excited. The gallery layout creates standing wave patterns, patterns of constructive acoustic interference, where sound reinforces itself at specific points in space. Different boxes appeared to resonate at different characteristic frequencies, as though they had been tuned. Infrasound components below 20 Hz were detected in the deepest chambers, below the threshold of human hearing, but within the range of frequencies that affect human physiology. And then there is the frequency that keeps appearing in this kind of research, 110 to 120 Hz. A study published by neurological researchers at UCLA and independently reproduced by teams at the University of Trieste found that sound at approximately 110 Hz produces measurable changes in brainwave patterns. Specifically, it produces shifts in activity in the right temporal lobe associated with altered states of consciousness, changes in serotonin processing, and states of heightened suggestibility and relaxation. This is not fringe interpretation. These are peer-reviewed findings in neuroscience literature, and the Serapeum boxes resonate strongly in exactly this frequency range. The flatness of the interior surfaces that is so difficult to explain as a requirement for bull burial sarcophagi is directly functional as an acoustic requirement. Acoustic resonance efficiency depends on surface reflection quality. Surface irregularities that are visually minor can substantially degrade resonance. The 2/10,000ths of an inch flatness tolerance that no ancient Egyptian tool can achieve is precisely the kind of tolerance that would matter for a resonant chamber. The lid fit that seals the interior creates a closed resonant volume rather than an open chamber. The weight that makes the boxes essentially immovable once placed means the resonance properties are stable and permanent. Grok's overall assessment was careful. It did not conclude that the boxes were definitely built as acoustic chambers. It concluded that the acoustic hypothesis is more consistent with the totality of the physical evidence than the sarcophagus hypothesis, and that the precision of the surfaces makes more engineering sense as an acoustic requirement than as a burial one. The pyramid texts complicate this picture further. The pyramid texts are the oldest body of religious literature ever found. They were inscribed on the interior walls of pyramids at Saqqara, the same plateau that holds the Serapeum, beginning in the 5th dynasty. They predate the Hebrew Bible, the Vedas, Homer, by centuries, and they contain, in multiple passages, specific references to sound, vibration, and resonance as components of ritual process. Particular spells are assigned to be chanted at specific pitches. Specific vowel sounds are described as capable of activating divine presence. The construction of sacred spaces is described in ways that treat resonance as a functional property of those spaces, not an accidental one. The word used across multiple passages for the sacred resonance at the center of these rituals refers to something that scholars translate variously as the hum, the vibration, the primordial sound. Academic Egyptology reads these passages as metaphorical. That reading is defensible. It is also a reading that makes the text consistent with whatever the physical evidence says, because metaphor can be pointed in any direction. What Grok's cross-referencing found was that the frequencies produced by the Serapeum box dimensions matched the frequencies associated with the ritual spaces referenced in the pyramid texts. The vowel sounds identified by textual scholars as having special ritual significance correspond to frequencies in the range where the boxes show maximum resonance enhancement. This does not prove the texts are literal. It establishes that the physical and textual evidence are pointing in the same direction, which is more than the official bull burial explanation achieves. The dating question adds another layer that the field has largely avoided confronting. The standard timeline attributes the Serapeum boxes to the New Kingdom in the late period, roughly from about 1400 before the Common Era through about 300 before the Common Era. This dating is based primarily on tunnel inscriptions, on historical records of Apis bull burials from these periods, and on the general archaeological context of the site. But the dating evidence addresses the tunnels. It does not directly date the boxes. And at least some of the boxes show evidence consistent with having been in place before the current tunnel structure was built around them. In at least 2 documented cases, the tunnel walls appear to have been constructed around an already present box, rather than the box being installed after tunnel completion. If the boxes predate the tunnels, the question of when they were made opens considerably. And the period before the New Kingdom includes eras that the conventional historical narrative increasingly underestimates. The geological and geophysical evidence for the Sphinx, for instance, has led a number of researchers to propose an age for that monument substantially greater than its conventional attribution based on weathering patterns that point to periods of heavy rainfall predating the historical Egyptian civilization. If the Serapeum boxes belong to a similar pre-dynastic category, the manufacturing mystery becomes even more pressing, because it pushes the precision engineering into a period for which we have even less documented technological context. There is one more detail that Grok flagged that previous engineering assessments had not systematically emphasized. The tunnels of the Serapeum are not fully excavated. Marriott's 1851 work was extraordinary for its time and revealed the major galleries now accessible to visitors. But it was not complete excavation. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in subsequent decades have consistently identified additional voids, additional tunnel sections, additional spaces in the Saqqara plateau that have not been opened or fully mapped. Ancient accounts of the Serapeum describe a facility considerably larger than what Marriott found. Strabo, the Greek geographer who visited in the 1st century before the Common Era, described the complex in terms that do not fully correspond to the excavated galleries. The mathematical analysis of the tunnel architecture suggests a systematic organization that, if extended along its apparent pattern, would include additional gallery branches beyond those currently known. Multiple historical sources, accounts that were written by people who either visited or had access to descriptions from visitors, converge on a total number of boxes substantially higher than 24. If sealed boxes exist in the unexcavated sections, the full picture of what the Serapeum contains may be considerably different from what is currently known. 4 studies, as a recent detailed review of the evidence noted, could settle the core questions. Laser scanning of the box, interiors at high resolution, systematic tool mark analysis to establish definitively whether the surface texture matches ancient or modern abrasive methods, experimental replication attempts using documented ancient tools under controlled conditions with precision measurement of the results, excavation of the collapsed lesser vaults. None of these requires technology that does not exist. None of them has been conducted. So where does this leave us? Grok AI processed the available data without the professional pressures that shape how human researchers and academic institutions handle contested evidence. No career to protect, no Egyptology department relationships to maintain, no funding implications from reaching uncomfortable conclusions. It processed measurements, tool capabilities, manufacturing requirements, and physics. And what it found was not a specific alternative explanation for how the boxes were made. It found something more unsettling than a specific alternative. It found that the official explanation fails on too many specific dimensions, simultaneously to be accepted as settled, while the alternative explanations remain unconfirmed by direct physical evidence. The honest position, the position the data actually supports, is that nobody knows how the Serapeum boxes were made, not disputed at the margins, not contested on minor details, not understood. And the combination of findings is what Grok identified as most troubling, precisely because each individual element could theoretically be explained away, but the combination does not resolve. Precision-manufactured granite resonant chambers, too heavy to place using documented ancient methods in the space provided. Surface characteristics inconsistent with the stoneworking techniques of the civilization officially credited with making them. Acoustic properties precisely suited to documented effects on human neurological function. Built to tolerances that no experimental replication of ancient techniques has reproduced, belonging to a civilization whose entire remaining archaeological output does not approach this level of precision anywhere else in the record. The boxes do not react to any of this. They simply sit in the dark beneath Saqqara exactly as they have been sitting for longer than anyone can currently demonstrate. They were sealed on purpose. They were placed with purpose. They were manufactured to a standard of precision that current tools can reproduce and current ancient technology cannot explain. Whatever the purpose was, whoever achieved the manufacturing, the answer is not in any plan or inscription or text that has been found. The answer, if it exists anywhere, is in the boxes themselves and in the unexcavated tunnels beside them. And the instruments that could find it have been sitting at laboratories around the world while the boxes sit in the dark. The question is open. The instruments exist. The excavation has not happened. And 4,500 years of waiting has not made the surfaces any less precise, or the weight any less impossible, or the mystery any less real. There is one thing the conventional explanation has never been able to address that gets almost no attention in the mainstream discussion, and it may be the most important detail in the entire puzzle. The boxes have no tool marks on the outside. This matters because ancient Egyptian stonework on the outside of large granite objects, the rough working that shapes the block before the fine finishing begins, leaves evidence. Pounders leave marks. Copper chisels leave marks even when used with abrasives. The rough exterior granite work on obelisks, on colossi, on pyramid casing stones, on temple pillars is identifiable under examination. The outer surfaces of the Serapeum boxes show no tool marks consistent with the methods that produced every other piece of large-scale granite work in ancient Egypt. The finishing is not just precise on the inside. The outside does not look like it was shaped the way ancient Egyptian craftsmen shaped granite. This is a detail that mainstream Egyptology has absorbed by simply not discussing it. It is in the literature for those who look. It is not in the textbooks. Consider what the Serapeum represents against the full background of what we know about ancient Egyptian stone technology. The ancient Egyptians were extraordinary stoneworkers. This is not in dispute. The obelisks of Luxor and Karnak, some of them still standing after 3,500 years, are breathtaking achievements. The granite pillars of the temple complexes, the granite sarcophagi of the nobles, the basalt floors of the Valley Temple at Giza, all of it represents a tradition of sophisticated stoneworking that developed over centuries and reached a genuinely high level of refinement. But across all of that output, the consistent pattern is the same. The surfaces are impressively finished. They are not precision machined. Flatness is achieved visually and by touch to a level that was functional and beautiful. It is not achieved to tolerances measurable in 10,000ths of an inch. The Serapeum boxes are not a refinement of the Egyptian stoneworking tradition. They are categorically different from it. They represent a precision gap that does not narrow when you look at the best of Egyptian stonework and then look at the boxes. The gap remains the same. And that gap is one of the most significant unresolved questions in the archaeology of the ancient world. The question of where that precision came from, when it appeared, how it was achieved, and why it was applied specifically here to these objects in this underground location, waiting in the dark beneath a desert plateau, is a question that the scientific tools to answer now exist. They have existed for years. The answers are sitting in the measurements and the surface analysis and the acoustic data that has not been collected at the level of a rigor the question deserves. Meanwhile, the boxes wait. They have been waiting since before Rome existed, since before Greece wrote its first philosophy, since before most of what we call civilization had developed into recognizable form. 24 granite objects whose manufacturing process is not understood, whose purpose remains contested, whose precision cannot be explained by the tools of the people who made them, sitting in tunnels under a desert that millions of tourists pass every year without knowing they are there. The official position says this is solved. The Grok analysis says it is not. The measurements say it is not. The surface texture says it is not. The ceiling clearance says it is not. The acoustic properties say it is not. And the unexcavated tunnels beyond the galleries Mariette found say that we do not yet know everything that is down there. Whatever the full answer turns out to be, it will not look like the version that has been in the textbooks for 150 years. The boxes have been patient. The question can afford to be honest.